So welcome. Tonight we are joined by Caitlin Walker, who is presenting at the NLP Conference in May. Delighted to welcome you this evening, Caitlin. Thank you so much for joining us. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your presentation at the conference.
Well, a little bit about myself, particularly in relation to NLP. So I went on my first NLP training in London when I was 18, so 1988.
Wow.
And my mum was a business, maybe an HR manager, I think at the time, and had just sent her people off on it. And one of them couldn't make it at the last minute. And she said, "Oh, we can't get a refund anyway. Do you want to take their place?" So it was very strange for an 18-year-old, a load of 40-year-olds in suits and ties. And yes, it was very, very interesting. I think in many ways it changed the whole course of my life.
Yeah.
And although I never trained with my mother, people often think because my mum ran NLP Northeast, they think we trained together, but we didn't. We were always separate.
Right.
And then I came across Clean Language, Penny Tompkins and James Lawley. I was working as an NLP assistant with them. They introduced me to Clean Language, and then that changed the course of my life again. And that's, I've become a specialist in, particularly in clean language and clean modeling.
Wonderful. I mean, what an amazing opportunity to be immersed in this from the age of 18. That's just fantastic.
Yes. And I still think now, I think, you know, we do clean for teens. And I think that's the age that you could really do with NLP.
Yes.
You know, yes. It's just when you're trying to work out how people work and how the things work, and just a way of keeping your confidence together. I think it'd be a great thing to have as PSHE in schools.
Yes, I say the same. That's my passion, would be to get NLP into the education system. So yeah, absolutely. So your presentation at the conference is entitled "Coding in the Moment." Tell us a bit about that.
So, you know, when I spent my formative adult years in NLP, and there are lots of things that you start to do once you know patterns and you know language patterns. So, you know, we had the meta model. So when you hear something, you start to code what kind of information is coming towards me. And then what can I do now that I've identified it? That gives you a different ability to then choose to react or choose how to respond rather than just reacting.
Yeah.
And then when I was learning clean language, and particularly because I wasn't a one-to-one coach, I was a youth worker, I wanted to bring it into groups. And years later, maybe 5-10 years later, I started to teach people how to do it. And of course, to teach people how to do what I could do, they started to codify it. And people would say, how can you sit with a group of teenagers, for example, or a board level? How can you remember everything they say? How do you not get dragged into the drama? How do you? And I'd say, well, you just don't get it. To me, I can see it all. I can see all the patterns. And you just go on the patterns. You react to what's a pattern in the group, not to any individual. And that seemed to be enough for me, but obviously it wasn't enough to teach anybody. And then just recently, about 5 years ago, I started a PhD in curriculum design and clean language interviewing. And I came across this idea of coding, and I thought, well, yes, but I do that in the moment.
Right.
And then I was explaining this to some students who went, for goodness sake, why didn't you tell us? What are your codes? And I was like, well, it's obvious. So coding in the moment is the ability to listen to the structure of what's being said, code it. And then if you know your purpose, you know the code, and you know what's gone before, coding in the moment gives you the agility to then make a choice. Am I going to go this way? I'll get this kind of information. Shall I go this way? I'll get this class. Shall I go this way? What's the best in relation to the purpose, and how do I keep rapport with the person? So coding in the moment is the minimal set of codes you need, given the purpose you've got and whatever you're doing with your individual or group, such that you can navigate via the codes rather than every single word.
It sounds absolutely fascinating. And being rather visual myself, I kind of get 3 or 4 representations all at the same time. I've sort of got an Enigma code, and then I've got computer code because our son's doing coding at the university, and it's sort of, and then my question is, what does the code look like?
So if I'll give you an example, So I have some very basic codes and a lot of systemic modeling, which is, I took clean language, David Grove's clean language, and Penny Tompkins and James Lawley created their model of his work called symbolic modeling. But I was working in groups and I've created systemic modeling. And I have some really basic models from other areas that I use. So for example, I might use the drama model, Cartman's drama model.
Yeah.
You can see,
yeah.
You know, is it if somebody talking about a problem? If it's a problem, are they operating from persecutor, rescuer, or victim?
Yeah.
And I might choose something like the triune brain. I know this isn't a model of how the brain works, but it's a way of thinking about state. Is somebody in red brain, fight, flight, or freeze? Are they in mammalian brain, trying to work out the rules? Or are they in neocortex? They're absolutely at their best. So you would never coach somebody in fight, flight, or freeze because they don't have enough brain capacity. Mammalian brain, I'd depend on how close or far away they were. And neocortex, great for patterning. So let me give you an example. So I've got a university senior leadership team. They've just been awarded £5 million and there's 7 of them and they're trying to decide how they're going to spend the money.
Right.
So my job is just to facilitate their conversation. I say something like, if this project with this £5 million over 3 years was to go just as you'd like, it'll be like what? And one of them says, it'll be unclear. And her manager says, well, that's it. That's just typical of you. I can't believe it. We haven't even started and you're so negative. Your negativity is going to ruin this project.
Oh, no. Okay.
So I've got, simultaneously what I'm doing is I'm going, I've clocked the word unclear. I'm just going to keep that over where it was said. And I go, okay, she's not quite fight, flight, or freeze, this one over here, the boss, but she's close and she's in persecutor. So she's persecuting, a little bit of rescuing the project from her colleague, and she's in fight, flight, or freeze. Oh, sorry, close to. And it sounds like it's happened, it's a repeated pattern. So there's probably within the mammalian brain, there's probably a contemptuous relationship. So there's no point me speaking to her because she's not in a good brain state for it. If I go and do something with the other person, I'll be going into a rescuing position, which will make it look like I'm rescuing her from this one. So that's my coding. I code, what's the brain state? What position are they taking? What's my best action right now? So what I do is talk to the group and say, okay, just everyone, eyes on me now. So everyone listen to me for a minute. Just notice, she says unclear. She says that's so negative. What we're going to do in a minute, we're going to find out when she said unclear, what happened to her just a tenth of a second after she said it. So what I'm doing is I'm not getting involved in the conversation. I've coded it and I'm simply behaving to distract, separate, and now we're going to go and find out what inference did she make about that word. And then we're going to find out what inference did she mean when she said the word, and then we'll carry on. So this is what I mean by coding. It's what's the minimal I have to do so I don't get hooked in emotionally and I make a good choice to move everybody into the sort of neocortical brain as fast as possible. And of course, I learned it. My background was with teenagers, often, you know, quite violent teenagers. And so I had to learn to do this quite quickly. And I use all my NLP skills to do it because that's how you keep them and you safe.
Yeah, yeah. And what a beautifully elegant model that's just, you've just got those pictures. But it's what struck me in what you were doing as well was dissociating, separating the elements out. So,
yeah, so you know, you can have is it an outcome? You know, there's lots of NLP who helps us with this. We all code. NLP is all about coding. But you know, there's an outcome, or was it a problem? There's lots of little codes you can use, but too many codes is like having, do you remember for those of you old enough, in the 1970s, it became really popular to have a knife rack with about 20 knives on it, you know, one for grapefruit and one for, and all your attention's on the knives. Whereas if you've got 2 good knives, all your attention is on what you're cutting. Yeah. And I think you want to have the minimal number of codes so that your attention's on the group or the individual.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. So it seems a little bit pointless asking the question. So what will delegates take away from your session?
Well, I think there'll be a layer. So one will be the notion of codes and coding.
Mm.
Then we'll be doing a little bit of practice so we'll do a couple of scenarios and get the group to see how fast can they code. Then so what are you going to do next? Because certain codes, you just notice them, but other codes you're going to have to respond differently.
Yeah.
And then I'm hoping that there'll be, we've done it before. I've done it before in a test session. There should be enough time then for them to consider, probably in smaller groups. What I'll do is I'll break them up, because at the end of it, I want them to consider in smaller groups, what are 3 sets of codes that would suit their specific workplace? You know, if they're teachers, what would you use in the classroom? If they're managers, what would you use in a meeting? So probably what are 2 or 3 codes that would be very useful for them to take away.
Fantastic. And presumably this model is going to work really well for NLP professionals who, you know, if they're working with clients or working with clients groups themselves.
Yes.
Fantastic.
And it's very obvious, and which is why I didn't teach it for ages. But even today, I was systemic modeling, which is where you've often got a group of people you're facilitating simultaneously.
Mm.
And we were saying, you know, if you say to somebody, for example, they were saying today, at what stage would you intervene in a meeting? Would you stop what's happening? So they were modeling the different strategies people have. And somebody says, oh, I just sense it. I sense it's going on.
Right.
And somebody else said, I notice it, then I stop and check, and then I'll intervene. And you go, okay, what are the 2 classes of information? One's gone for the state,
mm.
and one's gone for a process.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got to make a decision, because that's 2 different classes of information. Are you going to go for process, and therefore the whole group's going to go for process, or you are all going to go for state? And I think that when I explain it to the group in terms of coding and class of information, you get an even greater facility to manage the group that you're with, to go, okay, I can choose the class of information,
Yeah.
and then I can guide my group so that we're comparing comparable experiences rather than a bit of state here, a bit of process there, and we're all talking about slightly different things.
Yeah.
So I think once they are good modelers, this lot, you could see the lights go on. They're like, oh, okay, it's a different way of having even more agility without getting exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So we were mentioning earlier, obviously you've been to the conference before, we're saying it's a virtual environment, and we know, you know, an awful lot of stuff has obviously had to move into the virtual world in the last 12 months or so. So how are you planning to add value in a virtual training in this way, in a virtual environment?
Well, I think one of the things, if you think about what's wonderful about being at a conference, it's the connection. So although, you know, I love an audience, one of the things that I'll do is to create the material in small chunks, move people into small groups,
Mm-hmm.
let them get to know each other, come back into the whole group. Small groups, let's take the next point, come back into the whole group. Because I think that part of what you want to come away with is the joy of making a connection with another human that you wouldn't have had a chance to if this conference hadn't been there. If I'm just speaking from the front, I might as well have just taped it and you go and watch it.
Yeah.
So I think that we've done one practice. So what I'm going to do between now and the conference is we're going to have 2 more runs to find out what's the most connectivity that you can get here. Because you don't want to be going in and out the rooms every few minutes, because that's exhausting as well. Do we want to just make one small group that you see throughout it? You don't just want to make 2 people. So we'll probably, you know, I'm just going to try and judge in the amount of time we've got, what's the greatest amount of connectivity people can have, as well as learning the topic, coding in the moment.
That's fantastic. And of course, the beauty of the conference platform that we're using is that any connections that are made within the session can continue throughout the rest of the conference, because of the conference app. It's not a case of just come on Zoom and then disappear again and go and have a cup of tea before the next one. That connectivity can continue throughout the conference.
Yes, and I know, you know, in the past, I can still remember, I can go backwards in my mind and think of the different conferences. And also, of course, because I've been coming to them since I was 19, 20 was my first conference. And so, you know, there's the different people, and we've all grown old in the different, in our respective ways.
Yeah.
So I think that with the virtual app, I think it will allow us to make connections, international connections.
Yeah.
We'll be able to keep up in a way that we couldn't before.
Yeah.
You know, because lots of people I've only ever seen at the conference because they live in different places to me. Whereas now I'm hoping that I'm going to meet people at this conference and go, oh, well, I've heard of you, but now I can meet you and stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what does the, I mean, you've been to the conference before, we've known each other a while. And so what does the NLP International Conference mean to you?
Do you know, I'd love to say something very professional, but one of the things that I've liked most about it is well, there's two. Some of the craziness. Do you know, I remember, was it Peter Heskell? One year, Peter Heskell, even something ridiculous, got hit by a bus, and she was doing modeling ecstasy, and somebody came over and said, can you cover for her? And I said, yeah, probably. And Patrick and I made it up, and it was great. It was one of the best things I've ever created. And I thought, for a start, what conference allows you to model ecstasy? And secondly, just what a joy to be allowed to do it. So there's been lots of crazy things that I've done there. I remember one year somebody did this a long time ago now. How can you have natural, they weren't talking about illegal drugs, but natural highs like drinking coffee, but how can you recreate them? So you had a whole room of people just having amazing little experiences. So there's that. Yes, yeah. So there's that silliness. But the other thing is, and I guess I have been going since I was quite young, it's the mentorship. Do you know, it's going, oh, there's so-and-so, I'm struggling with this at the moment, or, you know, I've just been given this project in education. Do you know what, there's so-and-so, I'll just go and talk to them about it. It's that, you know, I guess I'm an older person now in it, but having gone since I was very young, it was these wise people who were all quite interesting, avant-garde in their own thinking. And now they're sort of mentors to you. So it's a place where you can lean in, I guess. Yeah. It's a place that you can lean into other people. That's
a beautiful phrase, leaning in. It's yeah, absolutely.
And I'm really looking forward, I think, because it's been quite a tough year and it's been quite a lonely year. I'm really looking forward to seeing some old faces as well as new ones. But as I said, just leaning in and going, oh, hello. Oh, it's you. We like each other. You know, we've got similar values.
Yeah.
We want to change the world and make it a safe place and a joyful place to live in.
Yeah.
I think there's a philosophy to it, isn't there?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's the NLP philosophy, really, isn't it?
It's kind and brave.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
Feel that one. So, Cash, do we have anybody on Facebook?
We have a few people watching, which is always good. And we don't have any questions.
Because you've explained it so well already.
I do have a question, actually,
Oh,
Caitlin, if I may. You were referring to groups and more of a corporate setting is what I was hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it also applicable, the coding in the moment, to social situations, to families, to relationships?
Absolutely. Yes. So even when I work in corporate settings, one of the first things that bits of feedback that we get back is that they immediately start applying it at home.
Yeah.
Or I remember somebody who it was corporate and he'd been forced to come, and he was very reluctant. He was a real prisoner in the training. And then it was maybe about the fourth session, and he came in and he said, I thought this stuff was nonsense. He said, but me and my wife were at dinner the other day. He said, this couple came and they're always bickering. He said, the bicker. And I thought, hang on a minute, that's a problem. He said, that's a problem. She's playing victim. He's doing persecutor. They're both in problem. And he said, I just stopped them and said, can I just check? He said, I repeated back, for you, this is important. For you, this is important. What would you like to have happen? And he said, well, he spoke, then she spoke. Completely different dinner party. And I think that's what you want.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't, because whether you're in corporate or you're out in the streets, which is the other place that we work, people are people.
Mm.
When we don't pay attention, when we misinterpret, we project meaning, we're stuck in misunderstanding. When you listen, you ask questions, you inquire, you stay curious, we're more likely to find something collaborative to do together.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty. And we often say it, don't we? The beauty of NLP is in applying it. Clean language, NLP, it's basically all of these skills that we potentially have in our toolbox. It's about applying them. No point in having all these tools in the toolbox.
They're no fun. It's like theoretical yoga. It doesn't do you any good.
It doesn't quite do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Do you have any more questions?
No,
somebody is.
We
We have a comment.
Yes, from Lucy Heary, we have make the world a joyful place to live in. Yes, thanks, Caitlin.
So
Absolutely.
there we go. So if there's nobody else actually commenting now, as I said, there's a lot of people who will actually watch this back later, which is lovely, and that's the benefit of having all these recordings. So
one of the things that you can do if you watch this back later is you can spend a little bit of time just scrolling through different social media comments, and coding those can be really interesting. Coding how people try and hook you into a certain idea, how they like to play persecutor victim, how they play a story. And one of my little projects last year was to see if I could move Twitter conversations from contempt to curiosity to connection, just as a little, a pastime. Instead of doing crosswords, I would just see if I could shift the conversation. So that's always a good game. If you're going to come to the presentation, have a little go of that beforehand.
Wonderful. There you go. Home play beforehand. Wonderful. So, I mean, Caitlin, as we've said, you're presenting at the conference. You're actually presenting on Saturday, the 15th of May. You have a 2-hour slot, which is starting at 1800 BST, to use all our proper official timings. So it's basically 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock on the Saturday evening. Where else would anybody want to be?
Great for the Americans, not so good for the Malaysians.
But then we have the recordings, you see. So
Absolutely.
That's the other brilliant thing about having a virtual conference, is that actually all the recordings will be available to delegates, and to delegates only, via the conference app for 6 months afterwards. So
brilliant.
We've got nearly 80 hours of presentations and 6 months to watch them all in, and we're pretty
great catalogue.
We'll be able to watch them. Normally we don't get to see the presentations at the conference, so it's fantastic. So brilliant. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
I'm looking forward, Karen Cash.
I know you've already given us some insight to start working with, and we'll go and check some bits and pieces out in readiness for your presentation on Saturday, the 15th of May. So thank you so much. And we will see you in a couple of months.
See you then.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Caitlin.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.